Welcome to TEDx Countdown. This event is one of more than 500 mainly virtual gatherings taking place over these days and weeks in over 90 countries, all part of Countdown's global launch. But what on earth is Countdown, and what are we hoping to achieve?
Countdown is a massive collaboration to bring together every citizen of planet Earth who wants to do something about the single biggest crisis we face. From wildfires to hurricanes to flooding, our destabilized climate is already causing terrible damage. But the good news is there are many, many people working with creativity and determination to help us find our way through.
TED has never attempted anything at this scale before. We couldn't have made Countdown happen without the amazing TEDx community, including those who are joining us for the first time. We also couldn't have done it without the incredible partnership with Lindsay's group, Future Stewards, which brings together many people and organizations right at the forefront of the battle against climate change. Honestly, seeing everyone come together to make today possible has been unbelievably exciting and heartwarming.
When we think about the challenge of climate change, two things stand out starkly. One, we've pushed our home, the Earth, to its limits. Two, today's crises are all interconnected. The climate crisis is also a health crisis because of the dirty air and polluted water that sickens or kills millions of people every year. It's a crisis of equity, justice, and livelihoods, with the most vulnerable being the most affected. And it's a crisis of purpose and meaning.
Our goal is that all of us will walk away with a clear picture of what it will take to tackle this terrifying problem. Because although it's really complicated, there's actually a simple way to think about it. We, Earth citizens, have to stop sending greenhouse gases into the atmosphere, and we have to figure out ways of reabsorbing the excess emissions that are already up there. Picture it this way. Our beautiful planet is being overheated by a pollution blanket of CO2 and other greenhouse gases. When you zoom in, that pollution is coming from 5 major sectors: energy, transport, industry, food, and our misuse of nature. Scientists agree that we have to cut our emissions in half in the next 10 years. That's what Countdown means. Count emissions down. And at the same time that we're doing that, we're counting down to a clean, beautiful, exciting future.
What excites me most about Countdown is the chance to invite people everywhere to ask the same question. How can we make a difference? To discover that instead of feeling hopeless and helpless, we can actually do this. Yes, it's urgent. Yes, it's serious. But there's real momentum underway, not spoken about nearly enough. We are poised on the edge of a revolution in innovation and job creation. This is an amazing moment because we all get to decide. What do we stand for? Do we love ourselves and our home enough to preserve it for the future? I believe we do. It's at once a burden and a sacred privilege, and it's ours to do.
If you'll commit this time, we think this is a day you could remember for the rest of your lives. Thank you so much for being part of it. And so, let the countdown begin.
Welcome to our TEDx Green Neighbors Network event, part of the global Countdown launch, as well as the local launch of 2020 Eco Fair Toronto. The Eco Fair has been held at Toronto's Witchwood Barns for over a decade. This year, our 12th Eco Fair is being held as a virtual event, so you may be joining us from the Toronto area, elsewhere in Ontario, Canada, or even internationally. Welcome all. The event you'll be enjoying tonight is part of a 4-week countdown to a green new decade. We're going to introduce you to solutions, and there are local champions working to make a difference in 4 main areas: carbon countdown, waste not, active and healthy, and eco-economy. So tonight and over the next 4 weeks of innovative free online programming, let's all celebrate their achievements, learn about solutions, imagine what we can each do, and be inspired to take action. We are very excited about today's program and thankful to the organizers and presenters who have volunteered to make it happen, and to you for joining us. Just before we begin, it is customary within our circles to open what we like to call sacred space. It is no coincidence that the same word we use to describe the trees, the land, and the water is the word we use to describe our immediate surroundings. Our environments are as much our perceptions as they are absolute realities. I'd like to invite you to contemplate that everything you are seeing, touching, sensing, or interacting with right now has once come from the earth. As a token of gratitude, I've brought with me today the cornerstone of many cultures' textual perceptions and environmental concepts. I have with me fire, water, earth, and air. Please take a moment to orient yourselves in your current environment and connect yourself with the earth as we prepare for this valuable discussion about how to protect her. We would also like to begin by acknowledging and thanking the Indigenous peoples of this land. The Toronto region is in the Dish with One Spoon territory. The Dish with One Spoon is a treaty between the Anishinaabe, Mississaugas, and Haudenosaunee that bound them to share the territory and protect the land. Subsequent Indigenous nations and peoples, Europeans, and all newcomers have been invited into this treaty in the spirit of peace, friendship, and respect. The dish, or sometimes it is called the bowl, represents what is now Southern Ontario. We all eat out of the dish. All of us share the territory with one spoon. That means that we have to share the responsibility of ensuring the dish is never empty. This includes taking care of the land and the creatures we share it with. Importantly, there are no knives at the table, representing that we must keep the peace. Thank you once again for joining us. Now, without further ado, let's get the program started. Together, we can make this a green new decade. So let's celebrate, learn, enjoy, and then take action. I'd like to introduce you to Elizabeth Bagley. Elizabeth is the director of Drawdown Learn at Project Drawdown, where she connects people with climate change solutions. Elizabeth believes that we have the incredible opportunity and the obligation to write the next chapter of life on Earth. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Hi, everyone. It is such a pleasure to be with you. I'm coming to you from Sitka, Alaska, the ancestral lands of the Tlingit. They've been here for time immemorial, taking care of this incredible planet that we all call home. So I am coming to you also as a member of the Project Drawdown team. And you might be wondering, well, what in the world is Project Drawdown? Well, we are the world's leading resource for climate solutions. And since the 2017 publication of the New York Times best-selling book called Drawdown, we've really emerged as a leading resource for information and insight about climate solutions. Cities, universities, corporations, philanthropies, policymakers, and communities like yours turn to Project Drawdown as they look to really advance effective climate action. So our latest publication is called the Drawdown Review, and I invite you to download a free copy from our website at drawdown.org. But you might be wondering, well, what in the world is your name? What does the name even mean? Where does that come from? Well, the name comes from the scientific term drawdown, and drawdown is actually a scientific term. It's a scientific term that comes from that future point in time. Y'all have probably seen this hockey stick shaped curve of the increasing greenhouse gas, or those heat trapping gas levels that have been increasing since the 1850s, when Eunice Foote first discovered that the burning of fossil fuels is what's leading to the thickening of the blanket of heat trapping gases around our planet. Now, the moment of drawdown is this critical point right here. That moment of drawdown when those heat trapping gases in the atmosphere stop increasing and start to steadily decline. This is a critical turning point for life on Earth, and it's a point that we must reach as quickly, as safely, and as equitably as possible. So you might be wondering, how in the world do we achieve drawdown? Well, to achieve drawdown, we really need to understand the climate equation. And we're going to start by thinking about this gray box here as the atmosphere, and specifically the heat trapping gases that humans are putting into the atmosphere. Now, there are kind of 6 main areas, and we heard a little bit about this from the countdown folks earlier. The Project Drawdown science shows that we've got areas focused on electricity, food, agriculture, and land use, industry, transportation, buildings, and other energy-related emissions that are all the sources of those heat trapping gases. Well, the great thing is that the equation doesn't stop there. Thankfully, nature is on our side, and nature does us an enormous favor and actually removes about 40% of those heat trapping gases that we're putting into the atmosphere. This is nature all by herself doing what she does really well. But unfortunately, we still have about 60% of those heat trapping gases that remain in the atmosphere, creating that thick blanket. So knowing this equation really helps equip us to better understand where the solutions lie. And here's where they are. We can break it into 3 S's. The first thing we want to think about is reducing the sources. So the first S is sources. We want to reduce the sources of those heat trapping gases. And these categories might look familiar. We want to make sure we're reducing the sources from electricity, from food, agriculture, and land use, from industry, from transportation, and from buildings. The second S is sinks. We really want to make sure that we are supporting the sinks, enhancing what nature does well in terms of drawing down carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. So reduce sources, support sinks, and the third S is help society achieve broader transformations. These are the 3 interconnected areas for action that we need to pursue globally, simultaneously, and with true determination in order to reach drawdown as quickly, safely, and equitably as possible. I want to thank all of you for putting solutions into action in your communities to truly make this the Green New Decade, because together we can leverage the solutions at hand today to build a bridge from where we are now to the world we want for ourselves, for all life, and most importantly, for generations to come. A better path is absolutely still possible, so may we turn that possibility into reality. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Elizabeth. You really broke that down very well. I would now like to introduce you to John Love. John is active in the movement for a just, sustainable, thriving world for all. He has worked with the Pachamama Alliance, the Hunger Project, and most recently with Drawdown Toronto. John, take it away.
That was great introduction about Drawdown Toronto. About Drawdown, the framework from Elizabeth. I'm going to talk a little bit about the solutions that Drawdown, Project Drawdown, which is where Elizabeth is housed, is the group that actually mapped, measured, and modeled the solutions and they did the research and the math, and they proved that it is possible to reverse global warming. And that drawdown point in the future that Elizabeth showed us is, depending on which scenario you run, can it be achieved by about 2045 to 2050, and maybe a little bit later, but for sure it can happen by 2050. So what I'd like to do is just do a little bit of background on Drawdown Toronto. So Drawdown Toronto, really we exist to work ourselves out of a job. We want to make sure that Toronto is a leader in achieving that drawdown point in the future. Why have a Drawdown Toronto if we have a Project Drawdown that's doing the science and promoting the solutions? Well, basically, it's because Project Drawdown mapped, measured, and modeled the solutions globally. So the proof that we can reverse global warming is done with peer-reviewed research on a global basis. But the solutions to work to change materially the way that we're using up the resources of Earth have to be implemented locally. So there are drawdown communities springing up all around the world to make sure that our locality, our place, and I love what Carolyn said about having a relationship with place. So the place that we have a relationship with, Toronto and the surrounding municipalities, wherever we are, that we take a leadership role in reaching drawdown by 2050. So what are we doing? We've got three main focuses right now: education and awareness, where we're making sure that the good news that Project Drawdown has put into play is really spread widely. It's a message of hope and possibility. We do introductions, courses, presentations, media, social media. For example, this event, we're co-hosting this event. And we also think that it's important to highlight and connect the people and the companies and the organizations who are actually implementing solutions. And for that, we're beginning to work on a prototype for an online local action portal, which will show examples of people at work implementing drawdown solutions in their area. The other thing that we're doing is we want to make sure that everyone who's working on this problem is focused to the highest future possibility, that we're not ignoring the dangers or the difficulties or the challenges, but we're focused on what's possible. And so we're doing a project now to gather climate activists and justice activists to create a vision for what the GTA could be as a thriving place for all of us to live. Up where we live in Caledon, there's the beautiful nature, and that's the way that Toronto was for thousands of years. And now let's return it, restore it to the resilient nature that it once was. Another great thing about climate, the drawdown solutions, is that there are things we would want to do anyway. And the benefits of reducing carbon and reaching drawdown will be enormous for all of us in so many, many different ways. So tonight, as you go through and hear all the examples of people who are working on these solutions and implementing them, I want to listen with the question, what's your role? What's my role? All the solutions need to be implemented to reach drawdown. So, choose what you're called to. Go where your interests and passions lead you. And then move into action at the level where you can have the biggest impact. And to get us into an idea of how you might have the biggest impact, I'd like to show a video of our friend and colleague, Will Grant, who did an interview for an organization called the Pachamama Alliance last year, and it has become part of the drawdown introductions that they lead and we lead. So yeah, let's put Will Grant on.
A lot of social change, and especially in relationship to the environment, I think of what I call the 4 levels of action. The first is individual action. The second is action with my friends and family, the folks who I'm directly connected to. The third is community and local institutions. And the fourth is the economy and policy change and changing laws. And so, in the environment, level 1 is, I recycle, I use less, I drive less. Level 2 is I get me and my family to do that. And maybe I put solar panels on my roof, and maybe I join a community-supported agriculture, a CSA. Level 3 is that's when I start to do things like change the way the schools that I'm connected to, right? The way that I change my workplace, that maybe I organize in my town, right, to start moving towards a community solar array, or that I start to, I go into the industries that I work in and I make changes. And the idea for level 3 for me is the place where it's at the level of institution and groups, but where I'm still known as a person, And so the example, and the other model that I give for level 3 is, if I can get in touch with a person who's in charge within about a week and get a meeting, that's what I would consider to be about level 3. Like with some work, I can get a brief meeting with the mayor of my town, right? And then level 4 is, like I say, policy. It's change the law. It's write your congressperson. It's boycott this product. And the environmental movement, I think, in a lot of ways has given the message that's been at level 1 and level 4, right? Change individual actions, or sign this petition, lobby this person, right? And the thing is, I think our greatest impact is actually at level 2 and level 3, and especially level 3. And the reason that I say that is, if I change a local institution or something that I'm involved in, I'm not just impacting my life, I'm impacting the lives of hundreds or maybe thousands of people. I'm also changing an institution, and then other institutions can take a look at that and take the model for that change. And I think specifically with drawdown, like there's these 100 solutions that are named in drawdown. And the question is, how are they going to be implemented? But one of the things that the project did is that they looked at projects that were happening at what I've heard Paul Hawkins call from the middle out. Not just from the grassroots up, not just from the top down, but from most of those changes were organized by people working at level 3.
So just to leave you with a couple of thoughts here. What you'll remember in the principles that we have at Drawdown Toronto is to always have your actions be sustainable for your life and for them to be fun. We always make sure we enjoy what we're doing, and to carry with you this positive message. Yes, 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 and yay. So it goes like this. Yes, we can reverse global warming. Yes, we actually know the solutions. Yes, the solutions are already being done. And yay, let's celebrate and do more. So you can follow us, reach us, join us. We'd love to have you as a part of, and we're part of our work, and we're so happy to be a part of this program. Thank you.
Thank you, John, for inviting us especially to position ourselves in the wider world. Sometimes in all of this gloom and doom, we forget to be solution-oriented, desire-based, and focus on possibility. Project Drawdown and Drawdown Toronto are sure to inspire us to take our grievances and hopes up to the top. Coming up, we'll be tackling our second theme, waste not. Speaking to you first will be Sheena Sharp. Sheena is a licensed architect and a fellow of Architecture Canada. She is the principal at Cool Earth Architecture Inc. here in Toronto, which specializes in low carbon design. She also serves as chair of the Ontario Association of Architects Building Committee. Give it up for Sheena.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for inviting me to speak. So I'm afraid I'm going to start with a little bit of a downer. I was asked to speak about how well we're doing in the building sector in reducing GHG emissions and saving energy. And I have to say we're not doing very well. And Roger Pilkey says it starkly, but accurately. The scale of the challenge is huge, but that is not what makes achieving the goal impossible. What makes achieving the goal impossible is a failure to actually understand the scale of the challenge and the absence of policy proposals that match that scale. So in Canada, we have a federal government who has targets that are somewhere between 30 and 50% too low. And they're not even close to meeting their targets. And what happens between the targets and what's happening on the ground is policy. We do not have good policy. If we were on track in Toronto, for example, we would be renovating 60,000 homes a year. Do you see that happening? No, it's not happening. So what's the problem? Well, do we have the technology we need? Yes. Do we have the technology for fuel switching? Yes. Do we know how to do deep energy retrofits for buildings of all sizes? Yes. Do we know how to make additional power? Yes. Do we understand the co-benefits that might help us get there, like affordability and less air pollution? Yes, we understand all of these things. And if you look at the schedule for the rest of this presentation, this fair, you'll see lots of great people who will prove to you that all of these things are true. We have the technology. So what are we missing? So is it money? Because I hate to say it, but you know what? This revolution will be financed. That's how we're going to do it. And so everyone says, oh, no, it's too expensive. And Mark Carney says, doesn't matter. Like, you're going to go bankrupt unless you do this. That would be Mark Carney, former governor of the Bank of Canada, the Bank of England, currently a UN special envoy. So why do I think that there's enough money to do this? Because the 6 big Canadian banks have currently lent $106 billion, that's $106 billion with a B, dollars to the oil and gas industry. They could redeploy some of that. There are other dollars that could be redeployed on a scale that we actually need. So the money is there. So what we need is, our problem, I think, is that we're not actually debating the goals, debating the alternatives. We are effectively, what we're doing is committing random acts of energy efficiency. That's what we're doing. We're slowly getting better, but we don't know. It's like there's a fog over the mountains. We don't know whether we're going up a path that will get us to a target that's not good enough, or whether we're going up a path that will get us to the long-term zero emissions, zero carbon economy. And are there interim paths? And are there alternate paths? This slide is from a group called the Transition Accelerator. And the Transition Accelerator gets people together to work, to share and pool their knowledge, and pretty in-depth knowledge, like how much it costs to do this type of retrofit on this type of building. But people across building sectors, in the energy generation sector, and in the electricity sector, the gas sector, and in the building sector, to come together with a plan, to build a plan together. And if there are 2 possibilities, to debate those possibilities. So what's an example of a false target? Perhaps investing more money in fossil gas. What's an example of a action that might be on the right path? Investing money in electrification or green gas, which are 2 competing things, and we need to work that out. So this type of process where regular people come together is happening in downtown Toronto. Yes, the business people in downtown Toronto are going through this process to figure out how they can decarbonize downtown Toronto in 30 years. So what do we need? Because I'm sorry, everyone, all of us who are working together and doing one house or another, it's almost like insurmountable how much time it takes, and the fact that even if we go to electricity, for example, it's still got carbon. We need to be working together on all levels and coordinating on all levels. We need top down and bottom up. So I'm sorry to be political, but from Mark Jacquard's A Citizen Guide to Climate Action, we need better political action. You have to find a politician who is knowledgeable, give them money, work for them, vote for them. And then we have to keep coming up with the solutions and making them fit together. Next slide. So I want to leave you with one thought from Catherine Hayhoe, who is a Canadian based in Texas. And she says, one of the most important things that we are lacking right now is a vision of a better future that we can head towards, as opposed to only an apocalyptic future that we can avoid. And I agree with her completely. Thank you.
Thank you, Sheena, and especially for bringing it back to the importance of civic engagement. We really must remember to do our part and cast every vote that we have. Our next speaker will be talking to you about the essential topic of curbing waste is Shayan Shivanesan. Shayan is the project coordinator for Toronto Environmental Alliance's Zero Waste High-Rise project. He works with high-rise buildings across Toronto to develop and implement customized waste reduction plans and measure the progress made over time in waste output. Please welcome Shayan.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Aisha, for that introduction. And yeah, I'm so grateful to be a part of this kickoff with you today. So yes, my name is Cyan, and I'm the coordinator of waste reduction projects at Toronto Environmental Alliance. And if you haven't heard of us before, we're a local environmental nonprofit working to make Toronto a greener city for all since 1988. And we work on a range of issues from climate change, air quality, and waste reduction in Toronto. One of our main ways for inspiring governments and businesses to adopt green policies is to prove what's possible through community projects. Today, I want to share one such example of how a single community making a change can inspire an entire city to take action. This community happens to be a vertical community, a high-rise condo in Scarborough called Mayfair on the Green. Mayfair has completely changed our idea of what's possible in high-rise buildings when it comes to managing solid waste. You see, high-rise buildings have a reputation for being more wasteful than single-family homes, not just in Toronto, but residential towers all across North America. Cities like Toronto are pursuing ambitious waste reduction targets that hinge on increasing recycling and composting rates, but high-rise buildings are often seen as a hindrance to these goals. In Toronto, single-family homes have a diversion rate of 64%. This means that 64% of the total waste from these homes is recycled or composted. So 64% is being diverted away from landfills and incinerators. Multi-residential buildings, on the other hand, have a diversion rate of just 28%. It's easy to assume that maybe residents in these buildings aren't trying hard enough, and this has led to some blame and shame messaging. But Mayfair on the Green is challenging this narrative. They identified that there are structural barriers to make it more difficult for residents in towers to recycle and compost, and implemented creative solutions to address them. Mayfair, like many buildings in Toronto, was built before we had widespread recycling and organics collection. This meant that there is just a single chute on each floor for garbage disposal. But recycling and organics have to be carried down to a room on the ground floor, or often outside and across the parking lot to reach the bins. So especially in winter months, this can be a major accessibility barrier for many residents. So when Superintendent Princely, the man in this photo, learned that organics going to landfill contributes to climate change and that most waste from households is organic waste, he was inspired to make organics collection the easiest option possible for residents. Princely convened a community town hall and proposed that the single chute be used exclusively for organics collection. Under this proposal, garbage would instead be taken to the ground floor waste room. This involved no costly changes to the building, just a simple switch in how existing infrastructure is used so that green behavior is the easiest option. Residents liked this idea of not carrying their heavy bags of organics down the elevator to the ground floor, and understood that if they sorted waste correctly, then they would have fewer trips to the waste room overall. The community agreed to the proposal, and Princely and his staff took time to go door to door and make sure everyone had the tools and education to take part in organics composting fully. This next photo of Superintendent Princely is beside the green bin that is now connected to their waste chute. By making this simple switch, Mayfair on the Green has reduced their garbage from 20 garbage bins per month to just 1 bin per month. And since Mayfair receives waste collection service from the city, which charges only for garbage pickups, while recycling and organics collection is free, Mayfair's effort at reducing garbage resulted in cost savings of over $15,000 per year. T didn't actually contribute to this success, but as soon as we heard about it, we wanted to make sure everyone knew because it told another story of the role high-rise buildings can play in our city's path to zero waste. It showed that high-rise buildings can lead us in finding new ways for community waste reduction. Over the last 3 years, T has organized dozens of tours of Mayfair with the mayor, city councilors, and media, which has helped shift the narrative about high-rise waste. This has inspired several other buildings across the city to take actions that make recycling and organics collection easier for residents. Now, T is running a program called the Zero Waste High-Rise Project, where we continue to identify modeled zero waste buildings. As part of this program, T conducted waste audits at buildings like Mayfair and found that they've achieved diversion rates of over 81%. This significantly outperforms even single-family homes, and we believe all multi-res buildings can reach this potential. To help grow this movement, you can join Zero Waste High-Rise Project at torontoenvironment.org. Anyone can sign up to the project's email list and stay up to date on our latest success spotlights and resources. One community at a time, both neighborhood and vertical, we believe that Toronto can become a zero waste city. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sayan, for sharing that. That's really great work and great initiative on the part of the community. Next, I would like to introduce you all to Leslie Solomonian, a mother and naturopathic doctor who knows that we cannot be healthy on an unhealthy planet. She co-founded NEST, Naturopathic Doctors for Environmental and Social Trust, to support the naturopathic profession to engage in advocacy for the social and ecological determinants of planetary health. Leslie, please proceed.
Thanks so much. And thank you so much for the opportunity to participate in this event. It's really inspiring to hear everybody's stories. Naturopathic doctors are trained to think holistically, and we emphasize the importance of environmental health in our work with patients. The reality, as has been mentioned already, is that we simply can't be healthy on an unhealthy planet. We have a reciprocal relationship with the land and with other organisms. And we really need to be mindful of our impact on them and their impact on us. We know that the impact of human activity over time on our own species, on other beings, and the planetary ecosystems as a whole has been utterly catastrophic. The unfortunate thing is that the naturopathic profession as a whole doesn't have a strong track record for taking action at a higher level in terms of agitating for improvements to social, ecological, and planetary health. I co-founded NEST, which is Naturopathic Doctors for Environmental and Social Trust, as a vehicle for building capacity within the naturopathic profession to support folks in engaging in advocacy for social and ecological justice. We are very new and we are working on building collaborations and partnerships. We are really excited to partner with Drawdown Toronto, with Eco-Caledon, and with Waste Less to promote strategies of minimizing food waste. Food is an important focus for NEST, for naturopathic doctors in general, but also for NEST in particular, both in terms of optimizing nutrition, which of course includes issues of access and food sovereignty, and the mitigation of the impact of our dietary choices on planetary health, such as minimizing packaging and emphasizing a local and a plant-based diet. We know that waste as well at every step of the food supply chain is a significant contributor to carbon emissions. Worldwide, approximately 1/3 of food produced is wasted, responsible for roughly 8% of global carbon emissions, not to mention issues of food security and the number of people who struggle to meet their nutritional needs every day. Currently, we are gathering information about local attitudes and behaviors with respect to food waste prior to launching our community-wide food waste reduction campaign, Just Eat It Toronto. This is being planned with Drawdown Toronto, Eco-Caledon, and Waste Less for January 2021. If you're interested in participating, you can find the survey. It takes no more than about 5 minutes to complete on the website of both Nest and Drawdown Toronto. So I welcome you to participate in that and keep your eyes and ears open for the challenge in the new year. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Leslie. I'm really enjoying the connections being made tonight between the self and the environment. On that topic, have you ever found yourself wondering, what would our future look like if we simply embrace the best that exists today? I have a film for you that tackles that very question. You can watch the film 2040 free online, available now until November 8th, and join us this Saturday, October 17th at 4 p.m. for 2040. What could our future be? Our youth panel event will be co-hosted by Green 13 and For Our Kids, and will be featuring speakers from Fridays for Futures Toronto and the Global Sunrise Project. Please enjoy this trailer.
My name is Damon, and this is my daughter Velvet. Her major concern right now is the elusive art of sleep direction. But soon, she'll have to face a rapidly deteriorating environment.
The ice sheet is now melting faster than the scientists predicted.
I think there's room for a different story, a story that focuses on the solutions to some of these problems. So in 2040, what will the world look like for our daughter if we just embrace the best that already exists?
Instead of having governments that are reacting to disaster, we need governments and businesses that actually take us off in a different direction.
Maybe it's farming, or it can be energy, it can be housing, or empowering girls.
I'd like to see deforestation being stopped.
Oh, that would be so cool. That'd be awesome.
Just be respectful to Earth.
Imagine Velvet. We adopted regenerative practices like phrases, pulling the carbon into the soil and making it healthier.
That's right, yeah.
And we embrace efficient local energy.
Bangladesh has 5 million solar home systems. They have that power in their own hands. This is bringing people together.
But here I am sitting on an aeroplane that is spewing out carbon. You can't help but be a hypocrite because our entire system is built on fossil fuels.
What were you guys thinking?
Well, sometimes we weren't.
The power of innovation, imagination, creativity to sit within all people.
People want to be working on something that they can see is actually helping to regenerate the world.
Everywhere you look, you will see incredible reasons for hope.
You could feed 10 billion people with the protein from marine permaculture alone.
Wow. Not only are there so many people who want to take part in telling a new story, we have everything we need right now to make it happen. What's your 2040?
I just want the future to be good.
I think with all of the children there just professing their love for the world, we can definitely say the kids are all right. Our next theme is active and healthy. To start off this energetic conversation, please welcome Dr. Antonia Sapong, a community family physician based in Toronto who is passionate about environmental and social justice. She's the co-founder of Plastic Free Toronto, an educational platform devoted to environmental sustainability, climate justice, and community resilience.
Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you for having me. We're going to spend some time talking tonight about why I eat the way I do. I call myself a planetarian, which to me means that I don't eat any meat, and it also means that I eat very few other meat or animal products. And the reason for this is that I know that the food that I eat not only has an impact on my own health, but on the health of the planet. So this photo comes from Christmas of 2019. This was the first time I subjected my family to vegetarian Christmas. And I was a little concerned because we're a largely Ghanaian and Nigerian group. And if you've ever been to any West African function, the minute you say there's no meat, the first question is, but where's the chicken? I'm happy to report that everyone thought this was delicious and that we are all still friends. So now we're going to dive into what people are eating in Canada in general. What we know is that half of the calories in the average Canadian's diet come from ultra-processed and packaged foods. We also know that the average Canadian is eating about 77 pounds of chicken, which works out to about 250 chicken breasts, 40 pounds of beef, and about 30 pounds of pork per year. We also know that only 25% of us, so 1 in 4 people, are eating the right amount of vegetables and fruits every day. And this is causing problems for our health. We know that poor diet, along with things like smoking, drinking alcohol, and not moving our bodies, is responsible for about 80% of cardiovascular disease, strokes, and cancers, which are the 3 leading causes of death in Canada. We also know that processed meats are actually carcinogenic. So our diets aren't super great for us. And the thing is, they're also not so great for the planet. We know that currently about 80% of our farmland is actually being used to either raise animals or to grow the corn or soy that we're feeding to the animals. And despite this huge amount of resources and land space that we're devoting to raising animals, we actually only get about 20% of our calories from animals, which raises the question of like, is this the best use of our resources? Especially when you consider that animal agriculture is actually the leading cause of deforestation. In the Amazon, it's responsible for 75% of forest loss there. And we also know that animal agriculture is the leading cause of biodiversity loss. And that's due to many reasons, things like habitat loss, climate change, as well as overuse of pesticides and fertilizers, which are both damaging the soils as well as causing things like dead zones in the ocean. So then the question becomes, how do we do this better? How do we produce food better? And the Eat Lancet report came out in 2019, and it was designed to answer the question of how do we feed 10 billion people while not injuring the planet? And basically, the answer is actually fairly simple. For North Americans, basically what we need to do is we need to eat about 90% less meat than we do currently and dramatically increase the amount of fruits, vegetables, and legumes that we are eating. And the reason for this, you can kind of see in this graphic. We know that agriculture is responsible for huge amounts of our greenhouse gases. So you can imagine if we're trying not to exceed certain thresholds of warming, we really need to tackle these greenhouse gases. This graphic shows the greenhouse gases of 110 grams of certain foods compared to driving your car. So you'll see here lentils, for instance, 110 grams of lentils is basically equivalent to driving an average size vehicle about 0.1 kilometer. Compare this with beef over on the right side here. And what you can see is that eating 110 grams of beef, which is about half of a small steak, is the equivalent of driving a car 10 kilometers. So you can see why then it becomes so important that we start to eat more plants. We know that not only will this decrease our land use, it will decrease our greenhouse gas emissions as well as our use of fertilizers and pesticides. But what you may not know is that it's also going to make us significantly healthier. We know that people who eat vegetarian, vegan, or pescatarian, so they eat fish also, diets, have a 12% reduced risk of all-cause mortality, so dying from any reason. We also know that people who eat vegetarian and vegan diets have about a 10 to 20% lower risk of heart attacks and dying from heart attacks. So essentially, we can both save the planet and improve human health by eating less plants. And I recognize that not everyone is going to be able to go fully vegan or vegetarian, and that's okay. We know that even small changes are important changes. Eating one less burger, for instance, is essentially like taking your car off the road for 500 kilometers. So if enough of us are making small changes, we will absolutely be able to end up with a world that we want, with a food system that we want. I think what we need to keep in mind is that smaller changes tend to lead to bigger changes, and bigger changes lead to changes in families, they lead to changes in communities, and they lead to changes in the world, which is what we are aiming for. So eat your vegetables and use your voice to demand not only that we are shifting our agricultural systems to more regenerative systems that are supporting the soil and the land and biodiversity, but also that we ensure that everyone has equal access to healthy fruits and vegetables, everyone has equal access to a source of income so that they can purchase these things, that everyone has healthy, safe homes. So thank you for listening, and I hope you all are inspired to eat a few more vegetables. I promise they're delicious.
Thank you, Dr. Tony. And now that you mention it, I think I'm a planetarian too. Next up, Please welcome Dr. Tomislav Svoboda. Dr. Svoboda is an associate professor, family physician, and public health specialist in the Department of Family Medicine at the University of Toronto. When it comes to valuing active transportation, walking and bicycling, he literally walks the talk.
Hi there, folks. Thanks a lot for inviting me to this great event. I'm going to share a bit about my personal sustainable transportation story and some system information that will hopefully inspire similar or even better action at the personal and community-wide levels. In 2002, the Larsen B ice shelf collapsed into the Antarctic Ocean, and this inspired me to go car and plane free for a year. An almost identical story, but 4 years later, again about the Antarctic, inspired me to go car and plane free again, and that time I never stopped, and I'll tell you how it went in a moment. First, I want to point out that transportation is important. Science from the IPCC suggests that we need to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions by 45% in the next 10 years and by 100% by 2050 to stabilize our climate to average temperature rise below 1.5 degrees. If we look at Canada's contributions, we each emit about 19 tons per person, and about 7 of those tons are under our direct personal control. Of those 7 tons, about 3 tons is from personal transportation, and just under 2 tons is from our diet. If we go car and plane free, we can eliminate 2.5 tons of greenhouse gas emissions, and by going plant-based, we can eliminate another ton, to a total of 3.5 tons, which would achieve almost immediately our 50% reduction if we chose to do so. So what are the alternatives to car use? So active transportation is the short answer. That includes cycling, mass transit, walking. If you look at mass transit in Toronto, for example, the potential is huge. Toronto is better than many communities, and there's many communities that are actually better than Toronto. Pivotal reports done by researchers, transportation researchers at University of California, Davis, that much of the drawdown report on transportation was based on, have shown that if we all push ourselves to the communities that have the best mass transportation in our region, and we do that globally, in other words, we make the best in our region the average of our region, we can actually achieve a lot. We can achieve transportation drawdown. In other words, we can achieve sustainability in our transportation systems. And we can do this at huge cost savings as well, amounting to 20% reductions in costs, or $140 trillion by 2050, which is equivalent to the entire global GDP. It would also make transportation more equitable. In Toronto, that would amount, if we were to push ourselves to the best in our region, we would increase our rapid transit from 78 kilometers of rapid transit in the city up to about 400 kilometers by 2050. How can we do this? Well, there's lots of community groups and policy options and plans that are being pursued, and it'd be really helpful if we started to join some of those and support some of these policy options and plans. TCC Riders is one such group that is leading the charge in terms of improving mass transit in Toronto. What about cycling? In Canada, the mode share, the number of people that use biking as their main means of transportation is about 1.5%. It's similar in Toronto. And if we use a similar methodology, we can achieve huge shifts, modal shifts in cycling in Canada. And the suggested modal shift would be as high as 7.5%, up from 1.5% in cycling and 7.5% in e-bikes. And the Transform Toronto plan goes as high as 28%, which is really laudable. And there's a lot of potential when you look at Toronto. 56% of our trips are less than 6 kilometers, and only 2.5% of these are by bike. So you can see where we can achieve a lot in terms of increasing our the proportion of people that are using cycling as their main mode of transportation. Again, how can we achieve some of this? There's lots of groups that we can join, that we can support. Cycle Toronto has about 3,000 members, and given that there's 32,000 or more cycle commuters in the city, we can definitely bolster some of those numbers, and we can join we can encourage our friends to join, and we can join ourselves and support some of these wonderful groups. What about transportation and health? Similar to plant-based diet, there's also huge gains in health that can be achieved with active transportation. Some of the most conservative estimates suggest that between 6 and 10% of many chronic diseases can be reduced with increased activity, such as can be achieved in active transportation. These include coronary heart disease, stroke, hypertension, colon cancer, breast cancer, type 2 diabetes, etc. All of these can be increased by a minimum of 6 to 10%, or improved by a minimum of 6 to 10%. And probably more realistically double that, given levels of activity that amount to about half an hour per day or about 150 minutes per week. So quite moderate, and active transportation can achieve that. Public transit use, for instance, can increase the amount of walking or activity by between 8 and 33 minutes. So even just taking the bus and subway or rapid transit can improve your physical activity. This next slide shows how much more efficient active transportation is. In terms of space, 50% of Toronto space is actually devoted to cars. And in cities like LA, it's much worse at 75%. And look at all the infrastructure that's required to support the same amount of people or the same number of people moving in a street. All of that infrastructure amounts to huge costs, especially when you think about developing countries that have to build roads, etc. So moving to active transportation in some of the high shift and drawdown scenarios is understandable when you consider how much infrastructure needs to be built. Finally, I've been living car and plane free for the last 15 years, and the first year was the hardest. I worried about being in imposition, but in actual fact, the vast majority of people have no idea that I don't get into a car or plane, and most of the people in my life, my family, my friends, my partners have been incredibly supportive, inspiring. I met many people that I wouldn't have. I've engaged in all sorts of adventures and activities that I otherwise wouldn't have. I took a freight ship to Europe and back a couple of times. You know, just a trip to Europe and back can actually amount to 1.5 tons of greenhouse gas emissions per person. So it's quite a big impact. So going car and plane free has been very rewarding. At times it's been adventurous. Each of us, I think, has a different situation. We'll have a different approach. We might have different priorities at this time. We might change our ways of lifestyle in over years, over months. And there's a lot that we can do personally and to make a big difference both at the system and personal levels. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Dr. Tomislav. I'm certainly inspired to dust off my helmet. For our fourth and last theme, we'll be introducing you to someone very special whose name I can almost guarantee you've heard, especially if you live in Ontario. Dr. Diane Sachs is one of Canada's most respected environmental lawyers and was the Environmental Commissioner of Ontario 2015 to 2019 when she spoke to groups across the entire province. Now heading Sachs Facts Law, she provides legal and strategic inspiration and direction on climate, energy, and environment. She also hosts a weekly podcast called Green Economy Heroes, and we'll be showing you tonight some excerpts from those interviews.
Hello, my name is Diane Sachs. Welcome to the Eco Fair. I'm sorry I can't be there with you in person today. I'm here to tell you, though, that there are so many opportunities to be part of the green economy in Canada. Because of COVID, like everybody else, I was stuck at home this spring, and so I launched my podcast, Green Economy Heroes. And it's been a wonderful opportunity to interview amazing Canadians right across the country who are making a living building and running businesses that help build the green economy. You can find it wherever you get your podcasts, Green Economy Heroes, but let me tell you about some of the people that I met. In Halifax, for example, on the East Coast, there's Carbon Cure. They're making concrete stronger by putting carbon dioxide permanently into the concrete instead of having it go into the atmosphere. At the other end of the country, in Victoria, we have Canada's first net zero bus line with double-decker electric buses. And they're going to be building their entire fleet on hydrogen. We have in Alberta, we've got Michael Kalmanovich at the amazing Earth's General Store. In Quebec, we have Desjardins Financial, a fantastic opportunity to do your daily banking without funding the fossil fuels that are destroying the natural systems on which our lives depend. And our Canadian banks have really big carbon footprints. In Manitoba, the amazing story of Aki Energy. Did you know that more than half of the geothermal certified installers in Manitoba are now Indigenous people, First Nations with significant barriers to employment, who now have important jobs, reducing the carbon footprint of their community, reducing their operating costs, increasing their comfort, being heroes in their community instead of being on social welfare rolls and in the endless loop of emergency response. In Ontario, so many. We have Brian Gilvacy, a rancher, who's been able to reduce the carbon footprint of the beef that he sells by replanting native tallgrass prairie on his farm. It's also allowed him to get rid of pesticides because the birds now eat the insects for him. We have Mike Brigham, the amazing Mike Brigham, who with 10 years of work helped build up a $60 million solar energy cooperative, which any of us can own pieces of, and who is personally financing the used electric vehicle incentive in Ontario now that the provincial government has abandoned all supports for electric vehicles. We have CoPower, so that anybody, any of us, can have green bonds in our retirement savings. We have Reficient, which repurposes telecom equipment to keep it out of landfill and to make smaller telecom companies able to operate less expensively. We've got little companies becoming more sustainable when they make hand-poured lipstick. We've got the biggest renewable energy developers in Canada. We've got an astonishing assortment of people, including a young man who was a DJ, had his career brought to a halt by COVID, and has used the time to launch a new business with sustainable shoe cleaning equipment. So there you go. All kinds of possibilities, big companies, small companies. There's room for everyone. We need everyone. Be part of the green economy. Thank you for your time.
Wow. I think that this has made it very clear that there is no dearth of innovative solutions out there. On behalf of TEDx, Drawdown Toronto, Climate Fast, Green Neighbors Network, Transition Toronto, and EcoFair Toronto, I'd like to thank all the event organizers, presenters, and behind-the-scenes volunteers that have made tonight's event such a success. While the talks today have certainly expressed the imminent danger over the horizon, I feel as though we've all been left with a taste of what hope could look like should we decide to carry it. Hi, Lynn. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Lynn Adamson from Climate Fast, and it's been a pleasure to be involved in developing this program, along with Drawdown TO, Climate Fast, and the other organizations. So I'd like to thank the volunteers and welcome new volunteers. We love everyone to get involved. Our motto is, we need to act on climate fast. So we work at both the local, provincial, and also the federal levels to push politicians for real climate justice. And we are informed by an anti-racist lens. So there are some slides. Yes, there we are. We're on Parliament Hill. Oops, we were on Parliament Hill. That's where we started. Yes, in 2012. And we managed to get 130 MPs to sign pledges to work on climate by doing a 12-day fast on Parliament Hill. And we continued over the next 3 years until it became part of the platforms in many of the campaigns to bring in a carbon price, to end fossil fuel subsidies and develop renewable renewable energy in the country. Now we do have a carbon price, but we are still having fossil fuel subsidies. So we really have to continue to work on that at the federal level. However, in 2015, we learned about the Transform TO program. It's the next slide, I think. There we go. Yes, up in the corner, you can see one of the pledges that we had the MPs sign. But in 2015, we started working on supporting the Transform TO program. They needed funding. So we did a campaign. You'll see the next slide has some pictures of our campaign, public education and mobilizing. There we are getting petitions signed and doing film screenings because it's really the public voice that matters in terms of, especially in local politics, it's very important to get that raised. We can do it at other levels too, but at the local level, you can make deputations. So next slide, you'll see that we did training programs for speaking to your counselor, deputations, and brought children down to City Hall as well, because as we all know, it's the future for the children that we're all here about. And you can see up in the corner that Gary Crawford, the budget chief, has his signed pledge to fully fund the Transform TO climate program. So after a couple of years, we did get the full funding for the program. We have to work on it now because with COVID, that has put a big hole in the city's budget. And there's a report right before the executive committee next week looking at how we can get back to doing some climate action along with the COVID action. So we will be mobilizing and we will be working on this again. So please get involved if you can. And also, we also have an innovative program called Kitchen Table Climate Conversations. And that is to try and engage people who aren't already environmentalists. So any of you on this call, if you wanted to host via Zoom, right now we're doing it all via Zoom, a few of your friends, neighbors, family members, or work colleagues to a conversation, we can provide a facilitator, and we have the materials are all on our website for doing this program. And we would love to do that we want to spread this throughout the province. So if you're outside of the city, especially, but also in the city, we'd like to do these programs with you. You can learn more about the program on Sunday. I think you can see the poster there. It's Sunday at 2 p.m. and there'll be a link available for the Eventbrite for that program. So that's called Cut Your Carbon, that session on Sunday. The Green Neighbors Network, I think there we go. It's also a partner for tonight's launch and for all of the EcoFairs events. Green Neighbors Network is a grassroots network of small local groups in wards or neighborhoods in the GTA working on local green initiatives, and everyone is welcome to join. So if you want to start a local group in your neighborhood, then you can join this network and support each other, because we all have to get involved. That's the only way this is going to work forward. So be sure to visit EcoFair Toronto website, find out about eco tours, exhibitor showcase, fun and games tab for kids. Do come back for more, and please do fill in the survey. There's a survey form. We can all make a difference, so please join in. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight.
Tomorrow's a new day. I'm here standing with you, here standing with me, standing with the world on our shoulders. I'm here standing with you, here standing with me, standing with the world on our shoulders. We can plant the seeds, we can make a change right now.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for that. I think you've really reminded us that plants grow from the ground up, and so does social change. Now we will be moving on to our Q&A portion. So if I could get all of our presenters to please turn on their cameras, and you will be muting and unmuting yourself if I call upon you. For our first question, so this one is for Sheena. Sheena, the federal government just promised $2 billion in energy retrofits. What does that mean, and is it enough?
That is impossible to say because the task in front of us is to decarbonize the energy that we use and reduce the energy. So let me give you a thought. If we changed, let's say we made our grid green, our electric grid green in Ontario, and we electrified all buildings, we would have to triple the size of the grid, right? So it's really a question, is it cheaper to go to zero efficiency in buildings, or is it cheaper to give a little bit of energy? I think that question is in front of us. I think this is a good start. I think we can certainly attack the areas of most need, particularly people in housing where they don't have access to gas. Heck, let's start with them and give them the advantage that they haven't had to date. So I think one of the fundamental messages that I was trying to get across is that we don't really have a plan, right? We just do these random acts of energy efficiency. So the $2 billion is like a random act of energy efficiency. It's a lot of money. We can get a long way. But for example, just let me give you an example. The Eglinton Crosstown cost $12 billion, okay? So if you think about the fact that we want to have transportation for everyone, the Eglinton Crosstown is in Toronto, a pretty small part of Ontario. And it's only really serving the people half a kilometer on either side. So that's why I say it's a good start. And the policy behind it to say, we are going to go electrification or we are going to go green gas and we are going to redo the system and make buildings more efficient. That's the thing we have to do first. Did I make sense?
I think that made sense.
Okay, good.
Our next question is for Sayan. So in reference to the Mayfair organic chute, what about the cleaning of the chute that carries the organics? Is there a cost to this?
That's a great question. I get a lot every time I talk about Mayfair. So actually, there's not really an increased cost for Princely and his staff. One thing I think to remember is that a lot of that waste that's now going down the chute to the green bin was going down the chute before to a garbage bin. So organics need to be bagged before they get put into a green bin. So they still have to be bagged when they go down the chute. And yeah, Princely has his routine process of watering down the chute once a month. Generally, all chutes have a sprinkler up top, and most buildings have a practice of watering it down on a routine basis. So yeah, there's no increased cost for him in terms of cleaning. Maybe just, being on top of it, washing the green bin every time it gets picked up, but that's maybe the only additional practice that's been implemented.
Great, thank you for sharing. This next question is for Dr. Tony. Do you think it's possible to make people eat less meat without making it much more expensive?
Yes, is the short answer. Yes and no. I guess it speaks to something I wanted to touch on and didn't have time to touch on, which is like the fact that at this point, like there is a huge amount of money that is going into subsidizing our industrial meat agriculture, such that the price of meat is artificially low. So if you were to take those away, then the price of meat would consequently go up, and then it would be much more comparable discussion. Because yes, at this point, to eat like local, organic, regeneratively grown, whatever that means, vegetables is quite expensive, and it's extremely expensive if you're like north anywhere where you're more remote and they have to fly these things in and out. So there's a lot that goes into this. So when we're talking about making food more accessible, like we have to be talking about like the fact that we need regulations to ensure that we're subsidizing regenerative agriculture, that we're subsidizing fruits and vegetables, that we are demanding things like a living wage, that we're demanding things like an end to poverty, all of these things that are going to make it possible for people to invest in the foods that are healthy for us and healthy for the planet. So it's a bit of a complex discussion that involves some equity pieces and some regulation pieces, and also the fact that our system is currently doing its best to subsidize the things that are harming us the most.
I think you're right in that it comes down to political will, right? where there's a will, there's a way. Our next question is for Dr. Thomas Love. So Toronto has turned over some roads to cyclists this summer, including Lakeshore. Do you know if this has had a big number on the, a big impact on the number of cyclists?
Yeah, I can say that anecdotally, the number of people that are cycling has increased, especially in some of the roads where there's new bike lanes. I don't know if the final numbers are in, but it is something that's being followed very closely. There has been, I mean, more importantly, threats of, I guess, repealing some of those bike lanes after, COVID goes away, if and when, and that's, I think, reason for a lot of us to get engaged with groups that are supporting active transportation and the bicycle lanes. I don't know, perhaps Cyan has more information, but that's my understanding with respect to increases in cycling.
Thank you for that. So this question is for Dr. Leslie. So how big of an impact would reducing food waste have on GHG emissions?
So according to the drawdown data, about 8% of global carbon emissions are due to the food waste problem that we have in all levels of the food chain. So and that doesn't even speak to the regenerative practices and organic practices and the other environmental impacts of industrial agriculture that Tony was speaking to. So, if we were able to reduce systematically and structurally, not just in our households, the problem of food waste, it would have a very measurable impact on global greenhouse emissions. The campaign that we're launching in January is focusing on strategies within the household. Obviously, that doesn't address issues of transportation of food and production of food and milk and so on that rots in fields all the time, nor does it necessarily address issues of food that's tossed out by things like restaurants and grocery stores and those sorts of things. So there's lots of organizations in Toronto that do a really good job of harvesting that food and making use of it. And certainly in my conversations with Drawdown, there's been conversations about ways that we can capitalize upon that food, particularly around issues of access. So yes, the food waste challenge is really focusing on households, but I think there's lots of potential there to scale it up in terms of looking at it as a structural issue.
Thank you for sharing. Our next question is for John. John, what does it mean that climate solutions have co-benefits?
Really, it is that all of the solutions are connected in lots of ways to the way we live in our lives. So, when we, for example, let's talk about the one that we were just talking about before, plant-rich diet. When we go to a plant-rich diet, our health actually improves. It turns out that, eating as much meat as we are in the current society is not really good for our bodies. One of the solutions that has been identified as a dramatically impactful solution is educating girls and women and empowering them. So when they finish school, they make different choices about marriage, about, and when they're allowed to own property, they make different choices about their families, and just the social justice element of being able to say that women and girls are empowered in our world, is amazing. So those are some examples of what it means to have a co-benefit to a drawdown solution.
I love that interconnectivity that we've found so present in today's themes. Our last question is for Sheena. So Sheena, which retrofitting solutions are the best solutions?
Oh, well, what kind of building are we talking about here? It is true that different buildings have different, I call them energy signatures. So for a single family home, for example, it's really the envelope in other words, the walls, the windows, the roofs that you want to retrofit. It's also the most expensive. So sometimes you need a sort of a staged plan to get you there. And then once you reduce the energy, you can put in a smaller heating system. For offices, for example, it's ventilation controlled, ventilation, proper ventilation, 100% in the buildings I've worked on all had 100% before COVID, but giving people really good clean air. But when it's 20 below, you can't just blow it on them, they complain. So you have to heat it up. So in office buildings, it's a slightly different mix. I did do, by the way, a little calculation from the last question. And I think to do a deep energy retrofit on a single family home is about 100,000. So $1 billion will get you 1,000 homes. And homes of all type in Toronto are 1.8 million, okay? So it's a start, as I said. But that's kind of the scale that we're looking at. And that's why I think it's going to be financed. It's not going to be done with government grants. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you for bringing it back to that. So just before we wrap up, don't forget, everyone, that you can be watching the film 2040 for free online. It's available now until November 8th. And you must join us this Saturday, October 17th at 4 p.m. once again for 2040, What Could Our Future Be? Our youth panel event co-hosted by Green 13 and For Our Kids, featuring speakers from Fridays for Futures, Toronto, and the Global Sunrise Project. You can find more information in the YouTube comments. I would just also like to thank all the presenters, volunteers, and everyone in front of as well as behind the stage, as well as TEDx and all of the partners for all of the effort that has gone into organizing this illuminating event. We truly do hope that you've left this with a renewed sense of purpose and hope. But before you go, we've got a little video for you. Just don't forget to take what you've learned with you.
Said aloud, what now? From a single voice to the greatest crowd, what now?
And with our arms wide open,
time for a change.
For every drop in the ocean,
we stand today.
With our arms wide open, we say tomorrow's a new day.
I'm here standing with you, here standing with me, standing with the world on our shoulders. I'm here standing with you, here standing with me, standing with the world on our shoulders. We can plant the seeds, we can make a change.